We haven't had to bleep anything yet.
I didn't copy and paste it. I like to usually type it out.
Cool. Based on all this, do it.
This PR is going in. What are all the things I need to think about?
No, that's not how it works.
The problem is they all cost like $50 a month, and that gets you like 2 or 3 a month.
I mean, let's all just be 100% honest.
Good to go. All right. DevSync episode 8. Another one, just Eric and I this time. Will is busy. He had prior obligations, so hopefully he will catch us in the next one. But we will make do without him. We'll see. Yeah, we'll see. We made it through the last one without him, so I think we can make it through this one too. But we'll
see again.
Exactly. I think we skipped another week, so we're a little bit behind again. So, but I don't know. This 2 times a week is a pretty good cadence. But we'll, as we pick up pace, maybe we'll continue to increase the amount per month.
We had a pretty good excuse last week. I mean, happy birthday, America, and whatnot.
Fair enough. Yeah, with the holiday and everything, that's fair enough. Other things were a little more pressing, so no worries.
Fireworks don't shoot themselves off. Okay,
it's a good point. Yeah, it's a good point. And gonna make a never mind. Well, yeah, we'll stick with that. All right. Well, in the meantime, though, we were just talking a little bit before this, and I was going to tie back to something that we talked about last week, where I had been reading the hype about Claude Sonnet 3.5. So Claude being Claude is Anthropic's AI model that they've been working on. They actually have a few different versions. So I think it was Opus, Haiku, and then Sonnet. I think Sonnet's actually the top one. I'll have to double check that. That might not be correct. But Sonnet 3.5, that was the one that was blown up on X, Twitter. That it is it is very good at self-correcting. So it's good at revising and essentially doing PRs on its own code. So it's good at writing code and then good at then reviewing code and making sure that code is actually correct. So I was trying that out this week and was able to do some cool stuff with it in a very short amount of time. So it wasn't exactly zero shot, but zero shot being first try. But it might have been close. So we'll get a little bit into the weeds, I guess, with it because it's pretty technical for those that have not played around with everything. But yeah, that's what I was going to jump into. How does that sound to you, Eric?
Let's do it, man. Let's
awesome.
do it.
All right. Well, I jumped into something pretty. I mean, it's pretty basic, but at the same time, it's kind of like over architectured on the back end, I suppose. Because really, I wanted to set up an AI app just to test it out. So just told it I want to build an infrastructure, and I gave it the parameters. I told it I wanted to build an AI app, so I wanted to connect to just ChatGPT or something like that. And I told it I wanted to use Kubernetes and Docker. I wanted to use Go for the backend, and then I wanted to use HTMX and Tailwind on the front end. And it's like, sure, it's like that's a creative stack, but that should give you a lot of flexibility. Let's do it. And then it kind of listed out some points, and then I was like, okay, cool, let's get started. And it's like, all right, here you go. And then it just spit out all the Go code, spit out the HTMX or the HTML file basically with the HTMX in it. And it included the Tailwind styling so we could get the page to appear correctly, and then was able to then give me the Docker setup. So it's like, okay, this is how you're going to set up Docker, and then here's your Kubernetes YAML to then be able to run the container in Kubernetes. It's like, okay, easy enough. So then I start plugging it in, and sure enough, the Go code I think worked right away. So I was able to run it locally, and then was able to run Docker to create the image. And then I hadn't even set up a Docker image repo. So then I asked it about that, and it gave me the rundown on, oh yeah, here's a bunch of different places you can store your image or images. Here's your different repo options. It's like, okay, cool. And then went and set that up. And then I was like, okay, then I need to run this in Kubernetes. And I was like, can I run that? I can run that on my desktop, right? And it's like, yep, here you go. If you're running Docker desktop, here's the settings. You can go in here, turn that on, and then you just need to change this in your YAML file. And it was change a config to node instead of whatever it was, local service, and so some other setting to just let it know that it's running locally. And then sure enough, then ran through all the command lines, and it was good to go. I mean, and this was in I don't know. I don't even know if it took an hour to even do that. It was probably like 30 minutes. It was crazy. But sure enough, like I had it running locally, and then I had it running on some other like huge port that Kubernetes does. I'm used to like local 8080, and then running it through Kubernetes, it's like port 32185 or something like that. So like, well, that's a long port, but it worked. And it was just like a simple AI app that was. I guess I probably could include some visuals on this one,
Hmm.
but it was just a. It gave me it actually gave me the idea of a AI generated story. It's just a text box. It's like give me a prompt for a story to tell, and then it would just go take that prompt, send it to GPT 3.5, and have it write a story about whatever that prompt was, and then came right back with it. So um, yeah, I don't know. I was pretty impressed. Like I mean, and that was with like a. I probably should go back and look at what that was, but it was a pretty quick turnaround in that conversation.
Hmm.
So so
Awesome.
thoughts? What do you think about all that?
No, I mean, like, so the first thing I think of is, I mean, I think one of the first chats we all had was, we were talking about how to get started in engineering and all that, right? And one of the things we talked about was just kind of the barrier to entry of just knowing where to start.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, just pick a project and go do it, right? I mean, my goodness, if this does not just kind of eliminate most of that, because I mean, what you asked for is a fairly complicated tech stack compared to somebody who's just like, I want to learn how to code,
Right.
who might just want to be like, I want to build a very basic website, from scratch or something, or I want to learn, uh, I don't even know how to build an API or something, and it could just generate a quick Express scaffold or something like that.
For
Um,
sure. Well, even I was going to point out, I think, because I've gone down the simpler route before when I was first messing around with GPT and building an
yeah,
app around GPT, and I think they have a one-page tutorial that's much simpler. Of I just want to run a local app that connects to GPT. It does the same thing where I want to be able to take in some input, send it to GPT, have it do something, and come back with the output. And there's just a little 8 lines of JavaScript. Run a React project, connect to OpenAI, and it's done. It's way simpler. But yeah, this just is that. Yeah, so I've gone down that road. That's the much quicker, easier place to start. I just you know added in the crazy scalable backend.
but I mean, you think about it from everything from somebody who's literally just starting, like, I want to try something out or I want to see how this works, all the way to enterprise, where um, why not use that as a basis for getting started? You know,
Sure. Right.
um, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm sure there's things you still had to tweak, and
Oh yeah.
so just like what we would normally do, we'd have to take whatever it was and productionize it and all that kind of jazz. But I mean, how much time did that save you just in research and probably just like literally the getting started time, right? Probably
Oh,
hours, I would think,
absolutely. Because they're
right?
in the past, normally, I don't know, usually learning a new infrastructure like that. Usually, there's probably a couple hours of trial and error trying to understand the terms, and then try to figure out, okay, I need to go find some sort of template that's close to what I want to do so that I can copy it. Just so I guess I don't want to, take a ton of time trying to really thoroughly learn every single term. I just kind of want to get things going and kind of learn on the fly. At least that's usually how I am. So usually there's a lot of trial and error, but this was way less. It was just you need to get the naming convention for your image correct, and then that's pretty much it. So fix there's like 2 lines in the YAML file that you needed to fix, and then it's good to go. So this was you should be able to see it. Sharing it now that the exact prompts that I gave it. This is the very start of the conversation was just like I want to build a system for rapidly prototyping apps using an infrastructure of Golang, HTMX, Tailwind, Docker, and Kubernetes. And can you step through creating a system for that? And then, sure enough, it was able to list out everything. Certainly, let's walk through it. Install Go, Node, Docker, kube command, and then basic HTMX, or whatever. Yeah, Golang, HTMX, Tailwind, containerize it, deploy it to Kubernetes. I guess I didn't get to the hot reloading part of the Go code, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
And then next step, it's like, okay, cool. Like here's your Go code. Uh, yeah, here's a little bit of HTML for HTMX. Let's go ahead and install some Tailwind. And then it was, yeah, so just crazy. And then it's like, here's your bash command for Docker. And then here's your YAML for Kubernetes and how to set that up.
It's interesting that it assumes that you want to do local development in addition to the container, right?
Sure. Yeah, true.
Not saying it's wrong or right or wrong. I mean, that's how I would do it anyway.
Yeah,
Um,
to be able to test, right?
yeah, I mean, I think once we get to the because the rapid prototyping part, I mean, um, I think I've generally kept that as local dev. Like if you're truly talking about rapid prototyping, because the whole point is just to get something done quickly,
Sure, sure,
and
sure.
then containerization's more off like when it's time to start shipping it somewhere. Like if you truly can't run it on your local machine for whatever reason, um, we generally leave that to last. But it's cool that it has you do both. I was thinking like the way that you had it worded. I thought maybe it was going to have you do basically just get Docker and Kubernetes installed, and then everything after that is okay. Now we're going to set up your Docker file, and now you basically just run everything out of the container. Which once again, not right or wrong. Um, no, this is awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. Yeah, I was kind of scrolling down to the part that this last part though, where yeah, it was pretty good about this is this is basically just copy paste, and then the only thing I had to go change was set up my Docker image repo,
Yeah,
and then update to be accurate to that. But otherwise, I mean, most of this was literally just copy and paste. I didn't copy and paste it. I like to usually type it out, except for the HTML. Skip that.
yeah,
Just so I
yeah,
get the feel
yeah.
for like typing it out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, otherwise it was a little bit of back and forth to create my repo and upload the image, and then make sure that I had the pathing right in that one particular parameter under the yeah the spec containers image. But then it was good to go. So yeah,
Yeah,
pretty crazy.
that's
Um,
awesome.
and I mean, and probably back to your point though, I brought this up before. I think that that's one thing that I'd like to improve as far as it pushing back a little bit and not being quite so. I don't know. I guess uh, not just following exactly what you say, because you know it'll just do exactly what you say. Like it'll just
Yep.
it's like that's what you want. That's what we'll do. So maybe it wasn't the best approach. So you have to then turn around and prompt it back. That is there a better approach or something else I should be considering, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
um,
I mean,
um,
that's the whole prompt engineering part, right? Is really dialing that thing in to meet like the exact specification. We were just talking about this today, actually, where the one of the bigger skills for people that want to learn all of this, they think it's just about what they type in as like the instruction. Do
okay,
this for me,
yeah,
and we were trying to just kind of explain like it's not just that, right? You're setting constraints, you're setting the parameters, you're also telling it what not to do, you're telling it what to do in the event that it runs into disambiguation, and like all of the different parameters that you would like if you were telling a person to do this as like a project manager, product manager, whatever,
right,
and you're explaining all the different things, you still have to do all that stuff, right?
true. It's a good point.
um, and that's why you see like some of these persona based bots and things like that, where it's you're literally just trying to install a personality almost, or like a mindset, right? Of like, you're going to be a product manager. Therefore, here's the way that you approach this. You're approaching it with an analytical mindset, but not technical per se. You're going to focus more on blah, blah, blah. Same thing with an architect, right? You're looking at how things connect to each other. And then obviously the engineers is obviously the one that I think we talk about most, which is just like, cool, based on all this, do it, right? Um,
Pretty much, yeah.
make the picture reality.
Right.
Um,
Right. Yeah. No, for sure. And that's yeah. I know that's another big topic right now is the agentic, I guess, AI swarm and AutoGen and all these different projects that are trying to really do that, where you subdivide it out. Where I need this from this perspective as a whatever. Give me an answer. Then as a the next thing. So product owner, then manager, then engineer, then QA, and right because it's all there, but you have to tell it how to use it, I guess. Otherwise, you just kind of get. I'm going to get really into it. You just get the highest probability. So probably whatever has been talked about the most on the internet, most likely probably the engineering perspective, is the one that it's going to just default to because that's where most of the words came from.
right. But that's why you put it in there, like focus primarily on the non-technical side to really derive the requirements. And like I said, it's almost like you're coaching a new product person, right? Just
Right.
not to belabor that point on the product side, but like you're coaching basically a brand new person on how to approach dissecting a problem.
Mhm.
Um, I know there was trying to remember who was actually doing this experiment, but it was like they had multiple bots set up with multiple personalities, and they had this loop set up, and it was just round robining the the problem,
Okay.
kind of in this
Yeah.
order of it would go from product to architecture to engineering and security, and then it would come up with something, and then that would go right back to product to say, is this all correct? And then it would go to architecture again to validate, and it just did this loop, and
Yep.
it was like self validate and make changes.
Yeah.
And what was funny to watch was like the presentation was pretty funny because it was just kind of like, oh, here's an AI generated scope creep, because it literally just started coming up with things
Right.
based on like the security persona was the one I thought was the most interesting because it was using like OWASP and those things to come up with here's what to focus on, right? So it would come back and say, make sure all of the communication is secure. So then it would go to architecture and say, make sure that you have SSL between all of the microservices. And then it would go to engineering and say, make sure you're generating certificates, and all this kind of stuff. And it would just keep doing this, like in
Yeah.
this loop and loop and loop. Um, and the other part that was nice was it also estimated the cost based on, gateway usage.
Oh, okay.
And so the estimate was for what would have been an hour-long meeting between four people. So senior product manager, senior security engineer, like a senior software engineer as well, and an architect. It ended up costing like $40 in AI, gateway
Compute time.
usage,
Yeah.
as opposed to, I mean, it was like $3,000 or something like that in salary costs or whatever it was, right?
Right. Right. For the hour-long meeting or
Yeah,
whatever it
and
would be.
obviously that a lot of that is just sort of tongue in cheek, just to kind of show it. And of course, the results, were they perfect? No, but for $40, heck of a starting point.
That's for
Um,
sure. Right. Yeah, for sure.
you know, and it was just it was more cool just to watch the iteration happen. Um, not certainly not what it's like being in a meeting room with people, but still watching just that sort of thought process happen based on the constraints. Um,
For sure.
it
Well,
was
especially
cool.
from the same source,
Mm-hmm.
because it's usually pretty, I don't know, usually pretty hard or pretty rare at least for one person to be able to stop and look at it from different perspectives. So to see that this thing can just do as many perspectives as you want and
Yeah.
actually, produce different results as opposed to just kind of circling around the same idea the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, the only limitation was just how much data it could keep track of, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's
Like
true.
that was pretty much it. Because so my first question, of course, was this is all well and good, but could it align to like an enterprise architecture?
Right.
So just saying like we're going to build a microservice sounds great, but does it know that we have this massively distributed Kubernetes framework that it has to plug into, and there's all of these sidecars available, or does it think it has to generate logging from scratch? You
Yeah,
know,
that's a good point.
is there already a service that does whatever this thing does?
Yeah.
Um, and how does it adhere to like best practices? So like, there's so much data that has to go in
Hmm.
from like the prompt, like the rules and the what is that, the system prompts, I think. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
like all of that has to be brought in. So much data,
yeah.
you know. Like, how do
Well,
you properly represent an architecture in a way that this thing could understand and fit into?
yeah, that's a really good point. Well, and I was that's why I feel like there's a, and I mean, I think we've kind of talked about it before, even, but just it just feels like there's such a huge opportunity there where you could bring it in and I don't know, have some sort of AI system that if you could have a way to be able to represent that, I guess, and it might even be, it almost would be, stages and snapshots of these are all the databases. It's like, okay, cool. Now it's got that context. Here's all the, here's every repo, or at least like here's one repo at a time, depending on the size of the repo, because you probably would immediately hit, context limits.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then just slowly introduce all the information, and then start to ask it questions. And so they at least would have the entire perspective or context of the system, where it's like, okay, I know we have all these endpoints, and then at least it can even if it doesn't know what those endpoints do specifically, it knows to go check them first, and then so between that and then the data is the one that just, man, like that would be such a killer to be able to have something that could come in and just look at all the databases, parse through all the data, just be like, oh yeah, like I get it. These two databases are basically the same. They're
Yeah.
not, but they're close. And like if you just move these columns around, rename some of these columns. You could save 20% of your data, just crazy stuff like that.
If you imagine for something like a managed like SaaS platform as well, where you're defining like, you know, object tables and you're defining all these fields for your business processes. And
Mhm.
imagine like a large enterprise who's got how many teams building on the same platform and everybody's building their own thing and
Right.
everybody needs their own fields because they need their own fields.
It makes sense to them.
You know,
They need it.
yeah. I mean, entity ID over here, but this team's like, no, 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 we're entity underscore ID. It's totally different. It's the
Right.
exact
No,
same thing,
yeah,
right?
it's completely
It's
different.
the exact same thing.
Right.
Um,
External ID. This is
yeah,
entity.
external ID. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, can you imagine like being able to save on stuff like that? Like just from a, and I realize we're right back to the engineering selfish mindset again, but like, can you imagine the savings in tech debt
Oh
of
man.
not having to sit there and maintain and go through like, well, we ran out of fields on this table again. What can we sacrifice, right? And you're like, oh, well, there's these 9 that are almost named exactly the same.
Right.
Like, oh,
Oh
you got
man.
to go find the owners. Well, who's the owner? I don't know. They left 4 years ago. So like,
Exactly. Hasn't been updated in 5
yeah,
years. I mean, we could probably delete it, but I don't know.
yeah,
There aren't any unit tests to verify what'll happen. So,
yeah, yeah. Unit
uh,
tests, hilarious. Classic, Jay. Classic.
oh man, it is funny actually. I just asked one of my friends the other day about just somebody that's outside of software. I think he's in finance, but I was asking him, what kind of software would you build?
Yeah,
And it kind of goes back to I guess what we were just talking about. He was like, I would, because he had heard somebody else talking about how I think he said it was Broadcom, the CEO of Broadcom or some other
mm,
tech company that was talking about it's like we spend 50% of our time understanding and then building those new features, and then we spend 50% of the time maintaining all the other stuff that we've already built. And it's like, yeah, no. He's like, so I would create software that helps with that. They would go back and maintain legacy software or update legacy software or whatever. And it's like, yeah, no. I mean, that would be huge. I mean, for you know horror stories of uh, banks and that kind of thing that have these mainframes that they're literal physical computers that can't be connected, so they have machines that are actually manually that have been rigged up to type on the keyboards and enter data just to save time because there's no other way to integrate it into a modern system, and just horror stories like that with legacy systems. So certainly plenty of opportunity with legacy AI or legacy systems and AI improvement.
yeah. Now imagine you take a different mindset instead of saying we're going to use AI to help us go back and fix stuff, but instead it's a proactive thing, and it's you're using AI to make sure the thing you're about to build actually makes sense, and it can tell you maybe where to plug it in, and oh hey, maybe it's not as hard as we thought it was because it's this exact same thing over here with the minor tweak, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like that kind of stuff. Or it's like, oh, maybe you just need to reversion, like create a V2 of your API and make a couple of, potentially breaking changes, but like future looking, that's how it should just work. Right.
yeah,
So you still
for sure.
maintain backwards compatibility, all that kind of stuff. Like that's why it's just like, it's so, I look at it from that perspective, and it's less about having to go back and find that old slide deck that, you built 5 years ago
Mhm.
for that one product that you barely remember how it works, but there is some team somewhere that remembers.
Right.
Um,
Or at least
all
somebody left
because
from that team.
yeah, 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 hopefully. Like or all this just to make sure that you can add something to it because it's finally come full circle
Mhm.
and folks are ready to add. So yeah, I just that would save so much time,
Oh,
so
for
much
sure.
time and effort.
Well, that was something that was an idea I guess I kept coming back to, at least from my day to day, was uh, it was almost a fluctuating checklist of like I know there and half the game was trying to remember everything that was on the checklist of as far as like I'm doing this thing, what else do I need to think about and do before this code gets committed, before we activate the system, whatever.
Yeah,
Um, but mostly on the day to day of just like this PR is going in. What are all the things I need to think about before I commit this? Just so I can at least save, some PR reviews that are going to be like, hey, what about that? You're like, yeah, I forgot about that. But just again, like to have some sort of system there that like a smart enough system that can handle a very large list of bullet points to check and go through them very quickly and save you that time. and then it goes back to that, like that, and that inverse time, or the sooner you can catch it, it's so much cheaper to fix it before it even gets created than to be fixing it once it's in production.
So much time. Um, just that'd be so phenomenal. I think we talked earlier. I think we talked before about having it be able to do a first pass on code reviews,
Yep.
right? Like, so instead of it being just basic static analysis and things like that, like
Yep.
really start to get into style and um, you know making sure the comments actually make sense for, like, or just auto generating the comments,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Exactly.
stuff like that. I think auto generating. I know there's been ideas out there about like auto generating like the entire PR itself.
Sure.
Um, Limited success, I think, in a few test runs. I feel like you make a one liner change where it's like you change this true to a false. Like, what is it going to say? You changed true to false. I think it's
Seems
not
valid.
contextual, right? Yeah, I mean,
Right.
yeah, it makes sense, but like you do lose a little bit of that contextual nature to it, and honestly, people already struggle with that enough. Like the PR is just used as a way to, like, I got to get the code checked in, so this is how you do it,
Right. Right.
instead of providing like the context, so that if we ever had to go back, there's something that makes sense.
Right.
You
There's at
know?
least a story for what happened, as opposed to, but not story like Scrum story, but just a reason as to why this happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But understanding the mechanics of the whole system, like knowing that, oh well, that true actually enables this entire feature that
Mhm.
has these downstream impacts, blah 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 blah. So now we're back into the whole, how much context can you really provide for
Yeah.
something like that? I mean, does that save a bunch of time? I don't know, maybe. But if I'm coming into a PR cold, and I wasn't working with that team specifically this sprint, or whatever, and it's like, hey, and they need me to review this code, it's going to take me a few hours most likely, because I got to go dig through the stories and go get the ACs and then make sure everything matches up, then go back and find the last few stories about the same thing just to make sure, it doesn't have some like just some downstream impact that was not intended, right?
For sure.
Um,
Yep. Well,
so
and it,
yeah.
I mean, and it sounds, it's almost similar to, at least on the security side, um, some of the static analysis stuff, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
it at least can just go and check, the routing of every possible method and variable and that kind of thing. Um, at least it's happening from a security scan. So just kind of be taking that to the next step that, when this changes, these are all the potential downstream impacts beyond just, find reference. So, which I mean, I guess could also help with like the context window situation where it could be doing it more on the fly, where it's like, okay, we just need the context for this thing, and
Right.
then it can go back and track the history of that thing a little bit more dynamically than just Git history.
Yeah, totally. And then, I mean, branch that out to a couple other scenarios. I mean, thinking like, we were talking about documentation.
Mm-hmm.
If it could write its own documentation, that's amazing. It could write it in different tones as well, right? So like it could write technical documentation, say for onboarding. It
Okay.
could write, it could write maybe less detailed technical documentation for operations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Things that are more consumable in like your enterprise search solution, so that if something were to go wrong, people could find it, or like whatever the case may be.
Yep.
But like it's not requiring people to go back and keep it all maintained.
That's true. Yeah, because that's the other
'Cause we
other
don't,
part. Right.
right?
Exactly. Because maintaining is yeah, that's a challenge in itself.
Yeah,
That's a great point.
yeah, we just don't. Um,
Yeah, same. I think that goes back to my infinite checklist. Is it what documentation needs to be updated to match this as I change this, because it's been
yeah,
2 years since this thing's been updated. So yeah,
I mean, look at definition of ready and definition of done. Like being able to once again take a first pass at a story and say, does this meet definition of ready?
mm.
Right? Does it have all of your, does
Oh
it have
yeah,
explicit acceptance criteria? Are they in the right format? Are the non-functionals defined? Um, do you have proper observability baked in for whatever it is?
sure.
Um, provide insights on, like, is this going to require a review from, say, like a security engineer
Yeah,
because of what it's changing? Things like just things like that, like, just as well as I do, everything seems great when we first get started in a sprint, and then the Tuesday before the end of the sprint, it's like, oh no, this needs like 3 reviews, and or before it goes out for release, it's like, did anybody get approvals from architecture and security and compliance and all the legal, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like that stuff where people just don't even know to ask.
Right, exactly. It's like I thought I'm good. Everybody approved the PR. It's like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, there's there's things outside of the PR that also need to be checked. So yeah, no, that's a very good point.
Oh, we're just sending this new ID out to this third party vendor to store. The third party vendor is already approved. So what's the problem with the data? And you're like, no, no,
Yeah,
that's not how it works.
you start crossing those boundaries, and
Yeah,
it's a little
you
scary.
tell them a Google on how to do a get revert because that
Right.
thing is going to take a while.
Oh man, yeah.
Um,
Strip out some data. Yeah,
yeah,
man.
too
No, that
funny.
that would be super useful. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I lost. I had another one, but I can't remember now.
Playing around with this thing in the background here, like it's pretty neat. I kind of went a different route. Obviously, you had your example of it basically setting up a project for you. I'm more having a conversation with it about its limitations.
Okay.
Um, it's interesting. Like it's all the stuff that exactly what you'd expect. So I don't know if it's necessarily specific to itself or if it's just kind of a more generalized fashion. Um, but it's cool that it's just listing all of it off. Trying to figure out why there's no memory between the conversations, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Um, they did it for design and ethical considerations.
Okay.
Makes sense. That's
Nice.
exactly what you'd expect it to say. I'm going to keep on it though. I'm going to really see what I can find out about this thing.
For sure. Um,
Obviously,
well,
I'm gonna turn it into generate a project for me by the end of the night because that's what's just gonna happen.
that's just yeah, exactly.
That's
That's
how
where
it
it
always
goes.
ends up working out.
The idea is to start flowing, and then it's like, all right, let's go. Let's see what this can do. So, well, and I mean, speaking of that, that was actually maybe I could pull up. I was looking at that as I was also experimenting with this. That was kind of the inspiration. Was just somebody had posted a thread about all the stuff just different examples that people had used to like take
Mhm.
advantage of it, and there's some pretty cool ones. I was gonna back to one of the examples I guess you were kind of talking about, and it's another concept I don't know if I've really talked about too much, but just like a dynamic interface where I think in their example they just uploaded Amazon, you know, uh, quarterly reports or whatever, and they asked it to just dynamically generate an interface to see the reports, and so it just created like this basic interface so you could like drag the timelines and interact with these reports, even though it's just from PDFs or whatever, which is pretty cool. So just being able to do that kind of thing on the fly, it just kind of reminded me of like the documentation thing, where I mean, you could very easily ask something to just create either documentation on the fly, so you don't need really to maintain it because they'll just read it, and be like, oh yeah, this is basically what's happening, and then even have it generate like a quick example of what it is, whatever you're looking at or whatever you're trying to understand, and it just has enough compute and understanding to just be like, yeah, sure, and just pump out something else to make it
Yeah,
just make it easier for a human to consume as opposed to taking all that time to understand it.
yeah, that would. I mean, that's what with engineering moving towards the more performance culture. In high tech, everything is moving towards that kind of performance culture, kind of like you know similar to sales, right? Where
Sure.
there's metrics that you have to hit, there's numbers you have to hit.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Okay.
I think one of the struggles on the engineering side is, what are the right numbers and how should you take those numbers when you see them?
Okay.
Um,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I think something like what you're describing could certainly help build out a way to keep some level of subjectivity in this, where it's not just this tabular report that says Jay had 7 commits, therefore his efficiency score is 9.1.
He's the worst.
Or whatever it is. But that's the thing. It's like, okay, so number of commits, what does that tell you? I don't know. Nothing.
Right.
It tell you
Without the
everything. I
context.
don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but it's like, and I know we've talked about this before. It's like, you're telling engineers they're going to their performance is going to be assessed based on numbers.
Right.
What do you think engineers are going to do? They're going to script those numbers, man.
I think
Um,
I even threatened that is if we start I forget what it was. Whatever metric. It was like story point tracking or something like that. I mean,
Yeah,
it's like people are going to game the numbers, and it's just it. Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't blame them because that's not the important stat. So, but I
I
get it.
agree.
They want to have numbers to track, and there needs to be performance or whatever measurements need to be made. So, yeah, I get it.
You know, are you? Do people work points or do people work hours?
Yeah, it's a good point
I
too.
mean,
Yep.
I'm pretty sure I work hours. Um, uh, yeah, no, that'd be cool. I should play around with that because we have to do like exec summaries and stuff. It's like, how do you take
Sure.
all of these different reports and like put it into something that you're going to present? You know, you have like 5 minutes to present.
Turn it into 15 slides with very light words.
Yeah, or turn it into one slide, right? Because it's like everybody's doing a round robin
Yeah.
for this presentation because you somehow got 30 minutes with some executive leader or whatever it might be, and you know you got 1 minute. It's not usually 1 minute, but you get my point,
But
right? It's like
maybe 5 minutes though, right? It's
maybe,
not a lot of time. Yeah,
maybe, right?
right.
Like we got to keep it at type 5 or whatever. And it's like, okay, here we go.
There you go. You
Here's
get
the
it
last quarter in 5 minutes.
exactly, and it's
Um,
all crammed on one slide.
by the numbers, yeah, and and trying to figure out what the right number to show is.
True. Yeah, it's a
And I
good
think no
point.
matter what, somebody's going to have a question about that number.
Right.
Where'd you get that number? Where?
Right. What does that mean? You know, you put a number on there that makes sense to you, but it might not make sense to people outside of it. So yeah, no, that's totally fair.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Um, I found, I think this was the thread. So, uh, yeah, so they had, um, yeah, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, uh, built a Minecraft apparently, which is pretty crazy. This is the one I would think I was talking about. Yeah, interactive dashboard from 100 pages of shareholder reports, and they just uploaded the shareholder reports. We're like, all right, can you create some interactive dashboards from this? It's like, sure, here you go, which is crazy.
Awesome.
I mean, it's like I don't know. It's like efficient, busy work. It's something that you would give somebody else to do. It would take them a week. This thing could just do it on the fly. Like, hey, make this prettier. Okay, like it's just cost you a couple cents, maybe not even. But yeah, GitHub PR reviewer bot, which
Oh,
is yeah,
nice.
this might be one to dig in there.
Yeah. I keep
This,
meaning to like all these things. I'm
I
sure
know,
other
right?
people have had these ideas. And I keep meaning to look it up, but then life happens, and it's like I'll do it tomorrow. I'll
Exactly.
do it Saturday.
Your free time.
Yeah, or I mean, Futurama comes on at like 11, and it's just like, what do I do?
Exactly. Need to prioritize here.
Yeah, I
Uh,
haven't seen that episode 100 times yet, so
yeah, exactly. I don't have every single word memorized yet, so. Well, it's funny because I've been doing a decent amount of design work too, and just seeing this custom SVG builder is very cool. That spoke to me, so that was another one that I was also thinking,
hmm,
man, that would be very helpful. Interactive World History Explorer,
nice.
create diagrams and data manipulation code from schema. So I guess that also was kind of what we were talking about a little
Yeah,
bit, where you could, yeah, SQL structure dump and just have it interpret it, which would be very cool. Here you go. Yeah, pitch deck, interactive pitch deck for investors.
it
So
was awesome.
right along those lines of executive report, and then yeah, then you get into some sort of UI. I'm not sure if Comfy UI. Not very familiar with that, but they were able to create a film grain plug-in, so that's pretty cool. Uh, FM synthesizer, so if you need to modify your audio, uh,
Nice.
and then of course the second brain. You got to have the second brain where you just give it a bunch of documents and ask it a bunch of stuff. So um, yeah,
Nothing wrong with that.
right, exactly. I mean, that's like the most day to day I think use as far as just again back to
Enterprise
the
in a nutshell.
infinite checklist. Like what should I be doing? How do I prioritize this? So yeah.
Yeah, I need to. Actually, I think what I'm going to do, I'm gonna start asking this stuff aviation related questions.
There you go.
I wonder if there's probably some room there. I mean, I'm sure people have already done it. There's probably some really good use cases for um, aviation training and stuff that could really use an AI lens to look into that.
I would think so, especially because I mean that's pretty heavily regulated, so it's not really going to change a whole lot, right? So it could be very
Yeah,
well.
it'd be interesting to see how it interprets some of the regulations. You
Okay.
know,
Mhm.
like especially when we're all sitting at the airport, bunch of instructors sitting there talking about this is what this thing says. Like, well, it kind of says that, but this is what it really means. And then we got to go find legal interpretations. It'd be very interesting to, I don't know, just be very. I can't believe I haven't thought of that until right now. I'm embarrassed.
There's I don't know. Yeah, I mean, that's probably, I don't know. There's a long ways to go. That is weird because I mean, especially us being on the tech side of things, are much deeper into it. But I mean, yeah, I also keep getting reminded that most people have never even they don't even know what GPT is. So
They've heard of it.
right, yeah,
I mean, let's all just be 100% honest. Even folks in tech, a lot of them don't really know what it is. They know they've heard of it. They know their boss has said to figure something out for it.
right,
Therefore, it's on the roadmap.
right, yeah. We need to look into
What to
this.
do with it? Pick any of those use cases you just saw right there.
Right,
I guarantee you, you go to any enterprise, there's 10 skunk work projects for every one of those.
that's a good point. Somebody
Yeah.
has played around with it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And every single one is a novel idea, right? Oh, so and so, look at what they came up with. And you're like, I just saw this on a thread with Jay. I mean, he just showed me a thread. Um, you know, we always joke around. It's like everything today is just basically Stack Overflow, copy paste, and then tweak, right?
Pretty much. Yeah, yeah.
Now everything is just gonna be like, oh, just GPT generated, and I just changed the copyright.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, that's what I think. I think Sonnet has taken it to the next level where it's just getting closer and closer to like more accurate code. So but yeah, exactly. It's like it'll pretty much have all of the Stack Overflow answers. So you just ask it, and it gives you your boilerplate code, and then
Yeah.
change a little bit, and you're good to go. So yeah,
They need to. I wonder if it looks at like advent of code leaderboard repos.
I don't know. Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, see how many answers it can
like
could pull out.
how many it can produce in like leak code and
Mhm.
stuff like. Yeah, now I got more stuff to look into.
I know, man. It just never ends. So much stuff.
I know.
It was funny because I mean, I pretty quickly got sidetracked after messing around with that. Because I was, pretty impressed with the HTMX and Go and Kubernetes and all that. And then I was just like, what else? And then had multiple other conversations of different ideas. One thing I keep looking at is just even optimizing this podcast, where I haven't done it yet, but I mean, a plan to eventually, I guess, what would you call it? Syndicate a lot of this content. Break this whatever hour-long conversation down into smaller clips. And I mean, I mean, if I wanted to spend at least $120 a month, there's tools that will do it. Like everybody has tools that will go and identify clips and automatically chop them into mobile versions and add subtitles for you automatically. But the problem is they all cost like $50 a month, and that gets you like 2 or 3 a month. And it's just like like I can come up with this on my own. So
Yeah,
I've
no
been
kidding.
looking into. I mean, that was one of the things I asked it about, was like, how can I take a long form and optimize it to smaller clips? And it had an idea as far as gave me a Python script, and it's like you can use GPT. GPT has a Whisper API that can convert audio to text. You can use that to find times or break that into timestamps, and then you can do an analysis on the words, and then try to find things that are either more emotional, or try to find some sort of trending database or whatever for YouTube, and then try to optimize for terms and trends, and identify clips through that. And so yeah, it had a pretty nice little system there. So
I say we go a completely different route. I feel like the market's flooded with shorts that basically or contextually make sense from beginning to end.
okay.
Let's just have it chop things like in the middle of a sentence, and that's
Okay.
just the content. It's just like 2/3 of a thought.
I mean, it's not a bad,
I'm just saying.
what do they call it?
Anybody done it?
TikTok brain, and just
Yeah, yeah,
just quick. I don't know exactly what happened, but now I got to find out more mid sentence. I like it.
content that makes you think. It's like there's 2/3 of a thought. Fill in the gap.
There you go. There you go. And then it also has a nice rage bait element where
Oh yeah, oh yeah. High memeability as well, because it's just it's basically Mad Libs,
just out of context. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, you fill in the blank.
modern Mad Libs. Pretty sure we get banned immediately because it's gonna pick the worst sentences.
I mean, we've kept it pretty clean, I think, but yeah, it will probably take some things out.
I don't think
Context
we've
pretty
had
well.
to we haven't had to bleep anything yet.
Not yet. No, I think so. I think we're pretty good
Yeah,
so far.
that's good.
Family friendly. Yeah, I like it.
Family friendly indeed.
Well, that's awesome. We will have to investigate that a little bit more.
That'd be
Uh,
funny. It'd just be
for
funny
sure.
to see what it comes up with. Just like generate random clips from this long form and make them as entertaining as possible. It'd just be funny to see what it considers entertaining.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. Maybe I'll mess with that this weekend. Um, well, it was funny because I did use. I mean, I do use some AI to edit this podcast, at
Mhm.
least to chop down the empty space, and so any audio gaps, it's pretty good at cutting those down. So, like I think last episode it was an hour and 5 minutes, I think, solid, and it chopped out over 5 minutes of just empty space, which is pretty crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So it finds the gaps and it can cut those out. And then I don't know how like that. I actually know how to do. I think for the most part because that just uses FFmpeg and you just look for like frequency in the audio or whatever. But uh, the video though, I don't know how it does, but it's able to pretty smoothly switch the cameras between who's talking. I mean, you tell it this is video one, this is video two, this is video three. So like Eric's video one, I'm video two, and then video three is both of us.
Mhm.
And then you give it the audio. So it's audio one is Eric, audio two is me, and then it's pretty good. It'll just go through and you tell it I want to do medium or high frequency wide shot. And it's like okay,
Hmm.
and then it just like based on what you do, it'll just kind of cut back and forth. But it's good at like keeping it and jumping to people when things are happening. So not exactly sure how they did that, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Um,
that's awesome.
so it's halfway there. But I remember I think I showed Will that, and he was like, and then what I end up doing is that I actually go through and just find clips to just take out and put at the beginning. So I was already kind of going your direction of just like trying to take things completely out of context just to have some
Yeah.
ridiculous stuff at the beginning. So Will thought that he was like, oh man, did the AI do that too? It's like, oh man, no, that would be nice. But it does not. I have to manually do that. So, but it
Or
might be
do
able to.
you?
Yeah, well, I mean, and I do. I guess I have developed a system for that where I typically just look at the audio and I look for high peaks. And so anytime I spot like a high peak, I just figure like, okay, there's something's happening there. Somebody's voice got elevated, or somebody's laughing about something or whatever. And then I usually look for those. That's usually when I'm skimming along. I'm just looking for that. So maybe there is a chance to or an opportunity there to automate that process a little bit.
Yeah. I'm more surprised there was 5 minutes of emptiness to cut out. You know how I feel about like silence. I don't like it. Just keep talking. Um,
It is, yeah. No, it's surprising, but there
now
is.
I'm
I
like telling
mean,
myself to do it. Like, don't talk all the time.
there we go. That'll get cut.
Yeah.
Uh,
Nice.
yeah, well, it's pretty aggressive. I think it's set at like zero point 0.2 seconds or something like that. So anytime once it gets to 0.2 seconds, and then more than 0.1 seconds after that, it'll start cutting. So, but it adds up. It's
Yeah.
pretty crazy. So pretty cool.
That is cool.
We've I don't know derailed a little bit from. I mean, it's still kind of related to what I started with the possibilities of generated code. So I was gonna steer us in the other direction as far as like scalability goes.
Let's
But
do it.
all right, yeah, we got a few minutes left before we hit our solid hour.
I feel
So
like this is more of a touch on scalability real quick, and then I feel like we could probably go. Well, we could probably go like a couple of hours on the scalability because there's how many different facets of it is there?
it's a good point. Well, and I mean our friend our local Kubernetes expert, I think, would be very sad if we went too deep without him. So
Oh well, in that case, let's just get into it.
that's right. Double the length episode. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Will be yelling at the screen for 45 minutes. Oh man.
Worth it.
Well, so I guess that was the one question I guess I had, and I know you and I have kind of talked about it a little bit before. Sometimes as far as over engineering. So I mean, and especially like the thing that I built right there, where I was just like, I mean, I can't help but think about over engineering as far as once you have enough experience, it's hard not to think about worst case scenario and just wanting to be prepared, but then also trying to balance with rapid prototyping and I don't know. I kind of sit in the middle here now because I've been listening to too much business stuff, and all the business advice is, don't even build anything until you like go get customers first and have them on a wait list and then start building because then you have people to build for. But the engineering side of me is just like, oh no, like I need to be prepared for everything. Like I need this thing to scale to a million users. So I'm gonna build ready for that first. Um, so I don't
Yep.
know. I felt like depending on the app and if, if you have a system ready to go, you can something like Kubernetes and have like a nice system where you already kind of know what you're doing. You could kind of build for scalability from the beginning without sacrificing a ton of time and effort and resources, right?
That's it. I mean, that's like the whole name of the game, right? Knowing what you're building for, what your targets are, um, and then just ensuring that if you're thinking ahead, you're using a tech stack and a platform and et cetera, that's actually going to allow you to scale. So if you're going to start a company today, do you go out and buy a whole bunch of blades to put in a data center? No. You start with an extra small on AWS and go from there, right? Not to say that people don't still obviously build stuff on racks and whatnot, but the elastic clouds have made it. I mean, we're basically just we're spoiled at this point.
Yeah.
You know, um, even some of the even some of the platforms like Heroku, where it's a little bit abstracted away, it gives you
Right.
just a little slider to move your resources up and down as you need them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, and then like in this context, if we're trying to keep this tied to AI ML, um, now it's scalability on different dimensions, right?
Okay.
Data throughput, um, bandwidth, all of those things all have to come together.
Okay.
That's where I think, yeah, we'll definitely have to save that for Will because
Yeah.
all of those different dimensions, like that, yeah, his expertise will be very welcomed here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Well, and I guess that's yeah. No, that's a good point. It is the lost. A lot of those tools are just there, and it is pretty easy to just kind of, I mean, even use the AI to show you how to jump into something like that and be ready to go and have it, scaled for whatever, whether it's AWS or whatever. Well, I was also going to point out, I guess it's so much of a convenience that then there's even services that just pile on top of AWS, so that um, I was going to Vercel, I think, is one. So that's the JavaScript environment, Next.js, I guess, or really just a React um,
Mhm.
service that's just all about quick hosting, and basically all they've done is just abstracted out AWS for React apps specifically, and then they just charge you 10x the AWS cost. So it's like, I mean, hey, I mean, for the convenience, it's hard to beat. It's nice to be able to just plug your repo in and then turn it into an app, like it's ready to go.
I mean, it's the name of the game, right? I mean, the whole thing is just an exercise in convenience at every level. Um, Convenience costs.
Yes, no, that's a good point. Um, well, and I think kind of going back to like what you were saying as far as just being prepared and like knowing your audience, and I don't know, I'm having a hard time. I guess the other cost maybe there with containerization and that kind of thing is just the complexity, right? And
Mhm.
as far as the cost is the people that know what to do when you need to change it or move it or whatever is really the cost as opposed to the monetary cost.
Yeah, which has always been. I mean, that's always been it's always been the brunt of the cost, right? Is you're talking about? I think earlier you chat, and I know we've talked about this before too, like the old mainframe systems,
Yeah.
right? Like people who know how to manage those today, or people who can still write COBOL, you know, that's like it's a diminished skill, but it's like it comes with a high price tag
Right.
because there are systems that, like you said, there's mechanical automation that operates a terminal on a machine that frankly just doesn't have it's never been migrated.
Right.
Other places have obviously built these like API abstractions to those old mainframes, but it's just to me it's always funny because like how is it just not how do you just not move it?
Right.
Like it doesn't have to be COBOL anymore. The data doesn't have to be stored like that. Like there has to be a way to move it. No.
Yeah.
Um,
And even yeah, right. Because I mean, I was going to say immediately I can hear just the resistance as far as I don't know, the records or we can't mess with the data. There's too much
yeah.
risk or whatever. But even then, you would think that if there's that much risk, then you just I mean, I guess there's always room for something to go wrong, but you'd create enough redundancies, hopefully, that you could eventually you have a long term safe plan to migrate off of it. But I don't know though. Like, every scenario is different, so who knows?
No, true. I don't know.
Not scaling that. That's not going to scale.
No. Just scaled. I mean, at this point, it's scaled as far as it's going to scale. It ran all those transactions just fine back in the day when it was the first tier system.
For sure. Yeah, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it did what it needed to do back then, and it probably was, started off as way more than they thought they'd ever need. So yeah,
Oh yeah, 4 megs of RAM in a machine? Are you kidding? What did you ever do? No.
craziness. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are right at our hour mark.
Nice.
Any closing thoughts on I don't know, Sonnet 3.5 scalability?
Yeah, cool so far. Need to dive into it more. See if I can prompt it with some of the ideas we've been chatting about. It. I've written a couple down here.
Nice.
So I'll play around with it. Maybe have a little bit more to follow up on next time. But mostly just looking forward to getting into this scalability conversation. Like, I'm actually pretty mad at Will for not being able to show up because that's going to be dope to talk about.
That will be a fun one actually, and I'm glad we didn't get into it too much because
Yeah.
he'll have plenty to say.
Oh yeah.
That'll be fun. Well, cool. Well, yeah. Well, we will expect live demos of your apps next week, and
Sure. Sure.
sounds good. Uh, any other? I don't know. I guess we have to keep the hot take tradition alive. So,
Oof.
any hot takes to complement with that?
Um, I got nothing this week, man.
Okay,
I got nothing.
not feeling the hot takes. Okay,
Yeah, not
uh,
feeling it.
yeah, hot
What
take
about
is
you?
there's no hot take. What's that?
What about you?
Yeah, no, I mean fair enough. I was gonna say I had something. Man, can't remember now. Uh, wasn't the manual, but yeah, I can't remember at this point. Yeah, I'm blanking on hot takes as well. I had one earlier, but I should have written it down.
No. Have
That's
the AI generate one for the end of the podcast. It'd be fine. It'd be fine.
perfect. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny because YouTube has started asking when you upload, is there any content in here that has been modified from the original? And I forget, they have three different, I think, questions now that it's like, does it look like it takes place somewhere that it doesn't, or has somebody been modified to say something they didn't say? And then
Oh goodness.
there's another question, which is just, I don't know. I mean, it's good on them to try to ask because I'm sure people are just going to ignore it. The ones that are going to do it are just going to do it. But it's
Yeah.
good to try to identify it at least.
I mean, it probably gives them a procedural way to then, if somebody reports it, they could say, "Well, you said you didn't do it, and this person said you did." Gone. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Violation. See ya. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
No, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good on them. It's not going to prevent it, but I mean, it's like anything, right? Like you can put as many checks and balances, it's still not going to prevent people from doing dumb stuff.
No, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's funny though.
But not this episode. We'll just I use it to reduce, but not to add, not to modify.
Yeah,
Oh, cool. Well, that's a pretty quick hour. It's good.
agreed.
Solid episode 8. We'll look forward to hopefully doing some scalability on the next one.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
then sounds good.
All right, man.
Thanks, man.
See you, dude.
See ya.
Later.